I never wrote anything. I showed people. I was a terrible child, and that's my childhood. Wonderful, loving parents, the last of 4 children, but very spoiled. And so I was a terrible child, being spoiled, and anyway, that's my childhood, right? I was born in the 30s, the middle of the 30s, early part of the 30s, in a little town in Alabama, about 9,000 people. I was the last of 4 children, but there was 10 years between me and the next one. 2 older sisters and an older brother. I was the baby in the family. My sisters always told me that my brother cried for 2 weeks when I was born because he wasn't the baby anymore. I left high school early. I started college early, and I got through college early. I got through college by the time I was 18 and went to dental school. And the college years were the most fun of my life. I belonged to a fraternity, and that was just a glorious period of my lifetime.
The airborne soldier became the supreme example of the classic Army principles of firepower and mobility.
I went through dental school. I was 8 years younger than the average age in my class. We had Second World War veterans, and the student on my left was a World War II veteran. The student on my right had been in the Korean War. While I was in dental school, then when I finished, I went to Savannah, Georgia, to the Marine Hospital in Savannah. I was stationed there. And it was a wonderful experience professionally for me. I had a chief that was a 4-striper. That means he's equivalent to a full captain. We carried Navy rank. And he made 1 denture a week. That's all he did. He took impressions, and then he would see a patient from the last week for other appointments, and he made 1 denture a week. The rest of the time he had his feet up on the desk. And I took care of the patient load that we had. The Coast Guard and the Corps of Engineers were there, and retired military people. These were the patients we had. The story about this experience in the hospital, I found out pretty quickly that if I organized my patients properly, I could take care of them in the morning or an afternoon most days. And so I started going upstairs in surgery and staying with my MD buddies who were they weren't my age, they were all older than I. But so I started staying in the operating room with them. There would be 2 in there. 2 of them would be on medicine, 2 on surgery. So I had to learn how to function in an operating room. I learned surgical asepsis, and I was another pair of hands at the tables. I've opened bellies for appendectomies. I've closed bellies. I've taken tonsils out. Not in their entirety, but I've done steps. No training. It was just, you were there. Hey, you want to close that, and close it. Or you want to do this or that. But one funny thing happened when I first started going in there. I'm doing something at a table, an operating table, and one of the MDs was wanting less something from Louisiana, and he was a Cajun. And I'm using a needle holder and trying to suture something. And Les looks over at me, and with his, I can't talk like a Cajun, but anyway, I'm gonna exaggerate. He said, "Hill, you idiot, you don't even know how to hold a needle holder." And he was right. I was holding like a pair of scissors. Nobody ever trained me anything. You put a needle holder, you use this finger and that finger, and you have those two to control. I didn't know that. Listen, was I embarrassed? Here I was, Dr. Tatum. I was a dentist, and I'd just been insulted and humiliated among my colleagues. That was one of the most humiliating moments of my life right there. But I'll tell you what, I never held an instrument wrong again in my life. And then I went home and I joined my brother. He was 10 years older than I. But we joined as partners and as co-equals because I was doing things he didn't know anything about. So I didn't go in as a little brother working for my big brother. We went in as equals because what I had learned to do, I was learning to do. He didn't know anything about it. So we practiced together for nearly 20 years like that, and it was an amazing relationship we had, and our practice exploded, offering the service we had. It wasn't done in Alabama before us, and our practice became regional, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, Northern Florida, and then over a period of 20 years, it went national because we were doing some things that were not being done by other people. Started my implant experience. That's interesting. When I was in dental school, I attended the first program given on dental implants in a dental school in America. I was with my brother. We were in Chicago at the midwinter meeting there, which was the largest dental meeting in America at that time. And my brother was a gambler. He loved to play poker and blackjack and those things. I never did. But about 3 o'clock in the morning, in a hotel room at Conrad Hilton Hotel in Chicago, my brother and several others of friends were playing poker. And one of the men at the table started talking about dental implants and suggested that he thought endosteal implants, that means an implant inside a bone, could allow us to eliminate free end saddle partials. That means partial dentures, removable partials, where there were no teeth on the back end of it, so the partial rested on the gum. And he was suggesting that implants could be put in the back of the jaw, principally the lower jaw, and not have to have removable partials. That fascinated me. That idea. That program I had attended in 55 or 56 was on subperiosteal implants, which went on the bone, not in the bone, and you put dentures on them that didn't rest on the gum. And that didn't interest me. I was full dentures. I was interested in restorative dentistry, putting people back like natural. I thought. So that really is my entry into implantology. Was in 1961. We first thought we got to do some research. So we had some cages built, and we were going to have a dog colony, and we were going to put implants in dogs. Then I researched, read, and everything that was being done, and I realized I wouldn't put what's being done in a dog's mouth, much less in a human's mouth. It was that bad, and the dentistry going with it. So we backed off. We never put a dog in the cages. But I kept the interest. And after a little while, I figured ways that I thought it could be done correctly and avoid the things that we thought was so bad. So I started making implants and putting them in. I never had a course, any training. I didn't want training in what was being done. And so in the 60s, I made implants. And in the later part of the 60s, I realized that most of these people that didn't have bone in the back of the mouth, that I wanted to put implants in them, had lost so much bone that most of them didn't have bone well enough to put the implants. Now, I'd make the implants to fit into the bone, whatever shape the bone was. But most of the people, they were high-quality patients, people who had spent a lot of money on their mouths and had gotten the best that was available, but wearing these partials had destroyed vertical bone. So many of these people didn't have bone. So, you know, my fertile mind says, well, we got to fix that. I'm a problem fixer. Problems, I'm going to look around the corner and try to find a solution to it. So I thought, what we got to do is grow new bone. We've got to grow new bone. We were preparing to start doing bone grafts where we would take the bone from a patient, or we would have a surgeon take the bone, and we would use the bone and put it into our patients' mouths. And fortunately, I ran into a fellow that I had met in 1962, who was older than I and had served 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam as a surgeon. And his name is escaping me right now. But I was telling him what we were about to do. And he was a little bit taller than I. And he put his hands on my shoulders and looked me right in the eye. He said, Hilt, if you start doing what you're telling me on these basically high-end patients, the complications are going to bury you. It shocked me to my roots because I knew with his background that I could believe what he was saying. So that stopped our progress to start doing bone grafts in their tracks. Then after a year or so, maybe 1 or 2 years later, the man that sat next to me in dental school, Don Tillery, who became an oral surgeon, Don called me on the telephone. He knew what I wanted to do, and he called me and he said, Hilt, I think I found the answer to what you need to do your grafting. He had heard a man speak, or he had read an article, one or the other. And this man had done 40 surgical procedures on atrophic mandibles to build bone up, to put dentures on, not for implants, to put dentures on, and he had not had a single post-operative complication. Now, what was happening when you conventionally did it, you would make incisions on the ridge, you would open the ridge, put bone there, and then close it back. And the complication rates were extremely high. That's what he was talking about. If I did that, the complications were going to be so frequent that it would destroy us with patient complaints. And so that's why we didn't do them. And Don, this surgeon that Don was telling me had done 40 cases without a single complication. We saw 2 surgical cases where bone was taken. He was using ribs, and general surgeon was taking a rib for him, and he was shaping the ribs and putting them in on the mandible and then closing them. And he had a secret. What was his secret? Well, what Dr. Alley was doing was he was making 2 incisions inside the lip 2 little incisions, and freeing the tissue over the whole lower jaw, putting the bone in, and then coming out and closing these incisions out inside of the lip. So they were totally remote from the bone graft. And then the people didn't wear any teeth for 6 months. And much of that bone would turn over to new bone, and that was his secret. We saw one patient when we were there that was 2 years post-op who had been wearing a denture for 2 years. And it appeared radiographically that almost all of the bone had resorbed away, but the surgery was a success. You follow what I'm saying? So I thought, what we're trying to do is grow a little bit of bone here and a little bit of bone here. And people still have some teeth. So if we could put bone there, and they don't wear a denture on top of it, and no pressure, and let the bone form, and then we put an implant down into the bone and close it, and it heals, and we let it heal, let that implant become solid without any pressure, then the internal stimulation should keep the bone. And that's exactly, in essence, what happened. So we introduced bone grafting into the field in first part of 1970, in the early 60s, and I got billed to harvest the rib for us, and we did 4 cases with the ribs successfully because they were done with remote incisions and they healed fine. And then Bill suggested that rather than using ribs, we could get better bone and more bone if we use the ilium. It's a part of the hip down here. And so we began to use the ilium and continued doing bone grafts. Of course, all these were in the hospital. We went some time before we ever had a complication. So we gained confidence and we were having success, and I was making all the implants that first I was making. Then some commercial implants came and we used some of them. They were called vitreous carbon implants, and it sounded good. It was a material developed by NASA. It was tested in the University of Southern California. It all sounded good. The implants I was making, the titanium implants, were being successful. And so we developed that, and then in 1974, in the posterior maxilla, in the back of the upper jaw, when a patient had not lost bone, but the sinus had enlarged. When the teeth were taken out, the sinus enlarges. The bone is taken away in the walls of the sinus that was supporting the roots of the teeth. So it's called, the sinus pneumatizes, it enlarges, but the crest can sometimes stay essentially the same height. But when that occurred, there was not enough space to put bone on top in the back and then put implants and teeth. So we were up against a solid wall there. And then I like saying then I got really smart. I had a dream. It was either dream or twilight sleep. And the idea occurred to me, we're on the wrong side of the mirror. Instead of putting the bone on the outside, we should put the bone in the sinus, elevate the lining and put it there, and then we would have length. And I woke up exhilarated, or became awake with exhilaration, and that was followed by horror, because the sinus was an absolute taboo area in dentistry. I laugh about this now, but it was so bad. I see only laughing too, and it was, in that period, if a dentist extracted a molar and the floor of the sinus came out with the tooth, so way up in that hole, there was an opening into the sinus. The dentist would look over this side, look over that side. He'd just put his finger over the hole and say it didn't happen, even if he's in a room by himself. There was such a fear of the sinus area in dentistry. And I had that fear. And I thought, my God, I just thought about trying to go put bone in this area. We did the first sinus augmentation where we actually made an outside window to the sinus. And the first we did were from the crest of the ridge. Like these, I had dug out and cracked the floor. The first several we did were from the crest, and we elevated the lining, put the bone in, let it heal, and then went back, put implants in it. And so that introduced that into the field of implantology. Now that's just a procedure that is very common, but that was the first time it was done. And we introduced bone grafting in 1970. I moved to Florida and joined this group and practiced with them for 3 years. And it was in a beautiful building and a wonderful practice and a large following. I had a national reputation at that time. I realized I gotta help. So I created the world's first titanium root bone system in 1978, I think it was. And I created that for myself and also to try to make some money, because the third the principal in our group taught courses and was generating $250,000 a year from his programs. So the practice was a showcase for his programs, and we did a wonderful quality of treatment, but it was not very productive financially. So I left the practice. First, I was going to have a surgical practice separate, and I rented a 1,200-foot office next to the hospital, and I was going to stay in the group, but still have a private practice outside of the group practice. And I did that for 2 or 3 months, and I woke up one morning and said, I don't want to do this. It's being in 2 places. And there was in the complex next to the hospital, the office complex, there was this empty space, 5,000 square feet, dirt floor, finished outside walls and roof. And I called the general manager, owner, Lou Vinci, and told him I wanted to look at that space. Every Saturday and Sunday, I was talking somewhere. There were a couple of years, the only day off I had in the year was New Year's Day. I was even on Christmas Day, I was somewhere in a non-Christian country, talking to groups in the Middle East somewhere, some of the Muslim countries, or in India, the Hindu and Muslim groups. So it was an unreal and a totally unhealthy life that I led, but I was enjoying what I did, and I did it, and all that. During all that time, I had 5 children, and raised 5 children. And my oldest child, I don't have a relationship with. And then when she was about 14 or 15, she fell in love with this little boy. And he had some traits that I didn't like, and he was abusive of her once. And I said, this one's not going to work. And so she rebelled at me when she was about 15 or 16 because of the boy. And she ultimately married him, and he's been president of banks all of his life. He's been successful. And she went to law school and had a successful career. but their rebellion to me is never ended. So that's just the way it is. But you know, I love her and I always will. My other children have been very close to them, all of them, and I have two boys that are dentists. One came, both of them, when they finished dental school, came with me, and I spent a year like they were in a training program, not interested in what they produced, it's what they learned. The second boy, when he came, he was 3 years behind the first one. The first son stayed with me, practiced with me, but he didn't do surgery. He did restorative, and so that was his choice. And I never forced him. I taught him an introduction, but he didn't do it. The second boy came, and he spent that year basically as an intern. But then his wife was from the town that he'd been reared in, and he wanted to go back there and live and practice. And he has a general practice, but he's never done surgery either. He doesn't do any implants. The next child was a daughter, and I've always been very close to her. And then my fifth child is another son by a different mother. And I've been close to him. I didn't rear him as fully as I did the others, but I've been close to him. And so that's my history of my children. I just love the home. I love the area. It's just been a gift. In this period that after the heart attack and after we got the house, we moved into it. I couldn't do anything. I still go up one step at a time. Behind the house, right behind it, we're right in the edge of the same valley. 14 feet behind the house, the hill goes up to the plateau. And then the stable was built right into the hillside there. And were stalls for four stalls for horses. And one of the stalls, in the back of it, there was a corridor that went into a cave that was a wine cellar. So I could walk, but I couldn't do it. I had no stamina. So I got Jose to go to town, and find a furniture crate. A crate, wooden crate, furniture about this big. And he brought that crate and put it in the cave entrance and put plywood on top of it and put an umbrella over it so the water wouldn't drip on it and ran an electric cord in it. And I got a couple of dental lathes, and I went to a hardware store and bought some grinders and some things like that and put on it and had an umbrella so the water wouldn't drip on us. And I sat there and started making things to occupy myself. And I thought I can make some things and sell them and make some money because I don't have any income. And my idea was I would make some instruments and sell them. But I would try to make some instruments to do the procedures that I did, made specifically for that purpose, and so make them better than anything that was available. And I made first I made some prototypes, and I got an instrument maker, and I tried to get them to duplicate them. It was not acceptable to me what they did. So then I decided I got to do it myself. Made the world's first titanium root form system, but it wasn't commercialized because I took a political office that required no commercial activity. So first I had them made for me, and then my friends in this small field that wanted them, I would let them sell them. Then I realized if I'm going to sell many of these, I got to have FDA marketing approval. So I had the world's first marketing approval for a titanium root form implant a couple of years before any other was in the world. I had made them before that, but I realized I had to make it legal if I was going to let other people have them. There wasn't one before any, so we were the first. I did a tremendous amount of talking. The field of implantology, from when I entered it in 1961, in essence, up until 1984, was a very small group of people. So everybody was together once or twice a year in meetings. And so I was interacting with all of the people that were deeply involved, and then the general public. So I've given well over 2,000 podium presentations. I was sharing and teaching in the speaking that I was doing. I spoke at a Midwest Institute in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. I was one of the speakers at it, and Joe heard me speak and followed me home.
I was born here in San Juan, Puerto Rico. My relationship with Dr. Tatum started in 1991, more or less, when I was hearing him in a conference in Ohio. And from that day, my life was impacted because for what I saw, my mind just started to just think. Somebody, someplace, in some way, there's some information that I haven't received that I'm receiving at this moment. So from that moment, our relationship became like a relationship of a father and son. And Hilt, as all these years have passed, he is a giver, and what he has of knowledge, he will give it to everybody that asks for it. So that's the way I met Hilt.
And he had heard me speak, and he started coming to the U.S. anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks a year and staying with me in my practice. And I remember his telling me before I left the U.S. that he had spent over 2,000 hours with me there in Florida since 1988. That's 6 years. He had spent over 2,000 hours with me.
As our relationship grew, Hilt and I would have conversations where I could realize and I could see his mind. I admire his mind, as I told you. I think he is, for me, he's like a genius, because he can see things that normal minds can't see. And as a matter of fact, I know that there are a lot of concepts that we have spoken that are not even written in a book.
I made over 400 different devices, surgical devices. And the use of these has just exploded our ability to do things better than we dreamed was possible because they were made specifically.
He talks of concepts, and I can see them in my mind as a 3-dimension concepts. And I can implement what he would be telling me because I could see it in my mind. And as I could see it in my mind, I could do it with my hands. So a lot of these techniques that he had conceived, it was very, very easy for me to conceive it in my mind because I saw it. And when I saw it in my mind, my hands were able to do procedures like he was doing at many years ago. So that's why it has been a great relationship with him.
And Joe can do anything I can do, and many things he can do better than I can because most likely he's a lot more skilled than I am. And the same without.
That's why it has been a great relationship with him because we have a mind that we see each other very easy. Well, we have been developing uh, a field in bone grafting. Like, for example, we're using autologous bone graft. Autologous is cadaver bone banking, and with a bank that we are using in the States called the Rocky Mountain Tissue Bank, and we've been developing products that that we see that have a very big contribution to the field of bone grafting. And we are seeing the results of many years, seeing that it has become very, very predictable. Bone grafting with the blocks that we have been developing here in Puerto Rico with the program, the Puerto Rico Maxi Course, and the Advanced Dental Implant Institute. So as we have been using them in our procedures, we have been finding, and we are putting all that data together. So we will be publishing all that information that will be coming out for the benefit of the dental community in the world. So that has been one of the biggest contributions that we have been doing. And also, the other contributions have been training people to understand concepts and to be able to apply these concepts in a very predictable way through mentorship, through training programs, because the goal of the Institute, the Advanced Dental Implant Institute and the Puerto Rico Maxi Course, the goal of it is to be able to train people in a way, in a fashionable way, that it would be like a mentorship where they can learn and apply these principles in their practices and to teach others, because that's really the legacy. One of the things that most impacts me of Dr. Tatum has been his kindness and his willingness to give to others what he has, you know. I really think our profession right now is in debt with this man, because this man has done so much things for our profession. And we have to realize that when he's not around, we will know all these things that he has given us, because he has been a person that has been willing to mentor other doctors as myself, and I have learned that from him. The legacy is to what you have, give it to others, so humanity can benefit from our contributions to the field of, in this case, to the field of oral implantology. Because I remember one time we were talking, and he told me, Joe, the best thing that you could do for me is to pass all the knowledge that I have given you, and we have spoke, give it to others, because that's the legacy.